what do we do? Well, we help plan and coordinate and fund further education and training, and that for many people that's a wide range of learning interventions, I suppose. But if you think about it, courses that you might be familiar with, post-leaving cert, 30,000 people do that. The apprenticeships and traineeships, we probably have 12 to 15,000 people within that. But we're also the other side of the spectrum, and we would support adult literacy and numeracy programs for over 40,000 people. We have people with disabilities who are trying to access the workplace. So we have a very wide spectrum of provision, and all in all we support over 300,000 learners per annum, mainly adult, who each one of those 300,000, no matter what their starting point is, they're starting from somewhere. And they start with a possibility about how they develop themselves, about how they can develop their potential and their chances for life. So whether it's employment in this sector, employability general, for people who are at a level of disadvantage or far back, it's about taking the first steps, and it's about helping them connect and supporting them to say, yes, as a human being, I have a possibility, I have potential, and if I'm supported in the right way, I can realise that potential, and that improves my life chances. And that's essentially what our mission is. And of course, we are one in that role. We're also one part of providing, I suppose, a pipeline of skills and manpower to the tourism and hospitality sector. I'm sort of trying to frame the presentation today because there's so many strands to this. What I thought might be helpful, because I know there's a panel discussion in a few minutes, what I thought might be helpful is maybe to talk a little bit about the type of labour market that Ireland has now, what's happening, and the sort of challenges that we need to be aware of as individual businesses and as sectors as we try to ensure the pipeline of future talent for our sector. And there's good news, and there's good news that actually brings a challenge. So I'm talking about a little bit about the overview, where tourism and hospitality fits, and challenges and opportunities. So this graph was wonderful graphs this morning, so mine might be quite nice, but we'll use a couple of graphs in this. Employment in Ireland is back over 2 million, and that's really very good. When Solas came into being in 2013, the end of 2013, employment was, just as you can see, bottoming out at 1.5 million approximately, employment. And unemployment had gone to over 300,000. So at the worst, at the depth of the recession, there was 15.1% unemployment in Ireland at the absolute depth. Today it's around 6%. So the focus back then was about how you connected unemployed people to the possibility of a very tight labour market for them. The focus now is we're facing into an era of skills shortages, where the would-be employee has choice. So whether they're in schools and thinking about their future, whether they're adults seeking to change direction, whether they're unemployed people looking at possibility, they have choice and extensive choice. And what this sector is facing, as are many other sectors, is the level of choice people have and the choices they make. And how do we ensure that accommodation, hospitality, tourism is a choice for them that they wish to take? And obviously from the training side of the point, that's part of our job. But actually, we're only one part of that. This is just to give you a snapshot, and there are many numbers used around statistics, and actually it's quite difficult because there are economic sectors, there's occupation classes, etc. And people, so you train somebody in IT. If they work in the ICT sector, they belong where they belong. But if they're working in this hotel, they belong within the accommodation and food sector. So the numbers can vary and the analysis can vary. But these could give you a proxy. So employment by sector in 2016, as you can see, accommodation and food, which is the broad hotel, pub, restaurant sector, and the associated disciplines around tourism, about 148,000, so about fifth in the list of sectors within Ireland. And that's an increase. That's a strong picture. Now, an awful lot more people are involved in tourism peripherally, and an awful lot more people are supported in the economy through tourism revenue. So This is more about direct people who are classified within those occupations. And if you look at the mix of skills that they have, and these are international descriptors of skills and skills levels, so professionals, associate professionals, skills trades, elementary administrative managers, etc. Okay? And obviously, tourism and hospitality, accommodation and food are represented in all of those, every single one of them. But there are particular challenges, I think, around the entry level occupations, the operative level, and then some of the craft skills as well. They seem to be particularly challenging. This slide, without getting too much into it, is just to help understand the labour market in a little bit more depth. Because the labour market, I think often we see, well, there are 200,000 people unemployed, or whatever the number is. We think that's the same 200,000 people that were there last month. And in fact, it's not. So while employment in Ireland in 2016 rose by roughly a net 50,000, in fact, there were 1 million movements of people between unemployment, employment, back to unemployment, or a category which I don't particularly like, which is called economically inactive. And economically inactive is traditionally people who might be retired, young people and students, but it's also a huge number of people who are actually not active in the labour market at all. And that represents an opportunity. Now, without again getting overly technical on this, when you look at the structure of employment in any economy, there's what's called the participation rate. That's the number of adults who actually participate in the labour market, who are seeking work, or in work or seeking work. And the target around Europe is a target for this of about a 70% participation rate. In Ireland, it's just over 60%. So that means that there are literally hundreds of thousands of people who potentially could work, could engage in right across the economic sectors that aren't. There's a whole host of reasons for that, lots of individual reasons, lots of, connecting, whether it's where I live, what I do, what my skills are. So there's a lot of reasons behind that. But there's a huge significant pool of people who could contribute, but for a whole host of reasons do not. And Ireland is actually lagging behind in that respect. It's a challenge, but it's an opportunity as well. Now, these next two particular slides, I really want to draw out what I regard as a key point for consideration by the tourism hospitality sector, accommodation and food. And if you look at the second one in, this is an estimate driven off by the CSO of the number of job hires in accommodation and food in 2016. And what it's indicating is that about 42,000 people at some stage in 2016 took up a job in accommodation and food, the second highest. And if you compare, say, with ICT, there was about 12,500 people took up jobs. So very, very significant movement and activity. But contrast that with the next slide. And the next slide, and this graph represents the net increase in employment in each of those sectors. So in accommodation and food, it was 5,000. So if you go back to that slide in transitions, what it's telling us is that there's enormous and above average levels of churn in people who are they're rotating in and out of the sector all of the time. And that's stuff we have to look at. And we have to consider what is it about in the round, and this is largely driven from the elementary and operative type occupations. What is happening in the round that we're cycling through? Now I have to say to you, this is not a phenomenon that's unique to Ireland. In most tourism sectors around Europe and probably around the world, this level of people churning through, this transitioning through the sector is very prevalent. And if you think about, say, students taking a summer job, and that's an example of that, it's the bedrock of many business, that ability to attract people who work for the summer and leave, and tied into regionality, seasonality, whatever. You can see that. But there's something happening in the capacity to retain people. having trained them up, having got them a job in the first place, how can we retain them in the sector? So how do we future-proof our businesses and future-proof our talent pool by creating opportunities for people that way we want them to stay? If you're the state training authority and you've choices to make about where you invest for the future employability of people, if you've choices to make, what you're looking to see is the long-run, sustainable nature of the employment opportunity. And that's critical. Now this sector does really well on many of those metrics. It really does. But we have a challenge, and I think these points perhaps illustrate that challenge. Another thing just to explain is some of the concepts around this, and this is where it's really important, again, from our point of view in Solas when we're trying to plan about how we invest and where we invest. And it's trying to draw the distinction between a skill shortage, which a skill shortage is where you don't have the pool of people with the relevant skills that are available to industry to employ. And that is actually the case to some degree within accommodation and food. And you contrast that with a labour shortage. And a labour shortage where you don't have people who are available. And they're very different concepts. Now, available means available, can we get them? And willing, I want to be employed. I'm looking for a job in this particular sector. Now, I'm very conscious that when I put up big slides and sweeping generalisations, I'm doing that from a macro point of view. And I'm very conscious and I'm very aware, because I've worked with the sector for many years, that when you're at the level of the enterprise, this is all very interesting, right? This is all very interesting and it's all great. However, you're trying to run a business. You need to manage your cost base, because a labour content is a huge part of any business of your cost, and you need to manage that in a way that you have a business in the first place. So I'm very conscious of the level of the enterprise, and in many cases the location of the enterprise. These are real practical challenges that you face. But if we're to tackle that challenge comprehensively, we have to look at it strategically. These slides, don't worry so much about the detail, but this is trying to illustrate to you over the next two slides where the analysis says skills gaps are in the economy in general. And these are for the professional, associate professional levels, ICT, science, engineering, construction, health, business and finance. And then in other occupations, clerical, construction, other skills trades, and obviously the accommodation and food sector comes in there, the operative and the elementary skills. Now the point that is we're trying to draw out here, and there's a lot of detail here. Again, don't worry so much about the detail, but what the message is. The message is that if you're looking for a job, if you're a young person looking for a job or considering your future, you have a lot of choice. You're in demand. And we can't corral people's choices. We can't say, choose this, choose that, work here, work there. You can't. It's a choice. So the attractiveness of the choices that each economic sector or business sector presents will determine how it is able to future-proof its talent pool into the future. And again, I think it's a critical point. So when you look at that potential shortages, well, how do you fill them? Where do you go for them? And there's a number of areas. So the one is unemployed pool. So I mentioned there are still 147,000 people unemployed. There's probably another 80 to 90,000 who are underemployed, so they're not getting enough hours to make up a working week or sustainable wage for them. And then there's a very significant pool running to 700,000 people who are not involved at all, who are an opportunity. So there are a pool of people within this state who could and should, if they're encouraged and supported, find a way and a route to employment. The education system, that's our part. We have a responsibility. My colleagues in higher education, my colleagues in further education, the providers, the education and training boards, ourselves, we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to, as best as possible, develop and implement provision locally, right around the country, that helps you acquire the skills that you want. Now, to do that properly, it's about us ensuring that the offering is right, delivered properly, properly certified, quality assured, etc. And we're working to do that. But it's probably as important to really reach back into second level and even before, with the choices people make and when they make them. So I know there's a significant initiative, and our own Natasha Kinsella is here today and others have been involved in this, reaching out and transitioning your students and saying, well, hang on here, there's a future here for you, there's a sustainable employment, there's an exciting industry here to be participating. But it even goes further back, it goes back to the choices they're making when they're students. And it also goes back to a little bit about our value system in Ireland. We're doing really well in encouraging people to take up higher education opportunities. We're doing very, very well, we're hitting all our numbers. But it's not necessarily the right choice for everybody. And many people learn best by doing. And that's where this sector can play a big part, helping people develop themselves through a formal qualification through the state and the learning part on the job. So apprenticeships and traineeships are examples of that. And I know Michael, Adrian and the others on the hospitality oversight group have been working on that. So we're part of the solution. We're not the only part, but we're a significant part. Obviously we can bring in people from the European economic area, and we do. And then employment permits are also a possibility. But from a state policy point of view, the issue of employment permits is at the end of the equation. And really, the policymakers have to be convinced that all other efforts are exhausted before we look to the employment permits as a source of supply. The Hospitality Oversight Group was a group of people who responded to a piece of research that was done by what is now the Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation, which was the expert group on future skills. We participated in that. But Michael and Adrian and others in particular wanted to see a push that the policy side of the state started taking this a little bit more seriously. And there's been a lot of activity to move that along. And there's 5 priority areas identified within that, one of which is the supply of apprenticeships and traineeships, and after what has been acknowledged as a slow start, that's starting to get traction. But there's a range of other areas in there that the group is working on, and it's very important because they are about the attractiveness and the understanding and the promotion of the sector as an opportunity for employment. And the last slide, again, is not my slide, but it's sort of going back full circle to the possibility. And if you looked at the possibility and the opportunity, and if you looked at what we heard about this morning from that example, that stunning example of success from Paul Carty, from Fiona, from Paul, from Mark, and if you looked at that vision of the future development of the sector, the seeds of the opportunity to tackling the skills challenge is through that, by firmly and continuing to root tourism and hospitality as a key economic sector of the state, because that's what gets the attention and that ultimately will get the investment when the going gets tough. As I said, great to be back. Overwhelmingly, the defining feature of this industry, and I've worked across sectors now, the defining feature of this industry is its continuing positivity and its continuing willingness and ability to look to the future. And really, that's what's going to take it forward. So thank you for the opportunity to be with you this morning. It's good to be back. Hope to catch up with people a little bit later on. And thank you very much indeed. Thank you.